Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Grand Torino. Before we get started, thank you for all your kind wishes and more get well messages of support for me. I was very ill over the last couple of weeks, and I did a live stream there last week, which was a bit incoherent. My apologies for that, but I was the leader up to tonight's interview with myself and Dr. E.Michael Jones. Mike, how are you, sir?
Good. Good to be here.
Mike, I'm not going to jump in with all the formalities. Anybody that isn't aware of you and the big cultural influence and what's going on around the world as we speak, there is no hope for you, and I'm pretty sure we don't need your progeny going forward. So with that, I wanted to break the quick premise and just to let you out of the gates to get running. At the end of our conversation, can we discuss a kind of a top-down overview of strategy? Let's lift our perspective up a couple of thousand view and see the movements in Europe, how things are evolving now with the Groiper movement coming up. You were last on the Groipcast there. I watched it thoroughly enjoyed it. Spoke about the no masturbation, the no fap November that's currently going on in the Groiper organisation. Wanted to touch in with you and Dave possibly in regards to the Groiper assassination of Charlie Kirk at the TPUSA briefly, and then transfer our main topic of conversation to John Waters' book, Bring Back the Bad Roads. You recently met John in Notre Dame convention, and you have just read the book, and many of my subscribers and many of my followers here in Ireland would have read John's book, and I'd be delighted with that and a few questions that I have to bring into play. Can we discuss John's book, please, first of all? What was your review of it?
Yeah, we had done an article by Geraldine Comiskey about John, an interview with John. And everybody thought it was really down. It was I kept saying to John, I met him for the first time at Notre Dame, and as we were walking out, he had given a talk, a really brilliant talk about how he lost all his friends. It was really about one of his friends being destroyed as a journalist. But I said, people think I should walk you back off the ledge. You know, you're just too down. And then when I read the book, I realized why. It's a terrible situation. Yeah, Ireland is a terrible situation. And John's book is basically about what happened to him, how he was in many ways blindsided in January 2014 on the Saturday Night Show, where this drag queen accuses him of being a homophobe. Now, being a homophobe is like being an anti-Semite. Or a racist. There's nothing you can say. As soon as that word gets leveled, you're guilty as charged, and anything you do to try and clear your name only makes the situation worse. So that's the beginning of his book, and then it kind of enters into a discussion of what happened to Ireland. Well, this is really significant because, first of all, it wasn't just Ireland. What I'm realizing is it was happening across the world at the same time. The synchrony of these events is absolutely astounding. So at the same time that Ireland is lurching toward their gay marriage referendum in May of 2015, you have a huge uproar in the state of Indiana. Indiana, in early 2015, passed something called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which said that little businesses should not be forced to succumb to the gay agenda. If they don't want to bake a cake for your gay wedding, you can't force them. This was purely in reaction to the push throughout the United States to basically demonize anyone who disagrees with the homosexual agenda. As soon as the legislature passed that bill, the CEO showed up in force in Indiana and said, basically, you have to overturn your law because we said so. So what this really was an attack on representative government. You have the CEOs, suddenly they can't contain themselves anymore. We're the rulers here. We are the rulers. And if you folks in Indiana want to make laws about how high your grass is allowed to grow or anything insignificant, that's fine with us. But don't mess with anything that we think is important. Because if you do, we will threaten your entire state. So at this point, it became clear to the people of Indiana that the corporations and the foundations that they create are more powerful than the state. And that means that the little people who don't have money, who don't have, are not able to buy politicians the way the rich people do, they have no protection anymore. You have no protection against the oligarchs. This is happening. This happens. So what happens is that Mike Pence, who is now vice president, he caves in, and he lets the CEOs rewrite the law of the state of Indiana. The one CEO who showed up was the CEO of Salesforce. He lives in California. He's got nothing to do with Indiana, but yet he can come in and tell the people to rewrite their laws. So who do they go to? They go to a guy who is the former mayor of Indianapolis, who's now working for Eli Lilly, the biggest pharmaceutical firm in the state of Indiana and the biggest employer in Indianapolis. This is uncanny because one of the things that John Waters exposes in his book is that the beginning of the takeover of Ireland began when the big pharmaceutical firms showed up during the period right after the turn of the century, because they were given enormous tax breaks. All these places showed up. Ireland was selling itself cheap. They had a 12.5% corporate tax, and these corporations came in to the praise, with a big welcome from the Irish politicians, and then they took over your country. They literally took it over because within 5 years, they're not just doing business there, they're telling you how you have to live. And on top of that, what we had was basically a march through the Irish Constitution. One referendum after another, repealing one article of the Constitution after another. 1, 2, 3, 4, for all the way up to 2018, which was the abortion referendum. And what you're seeing here, John points this out very well in his book, is basically one group of Irishmen after another are being deprived of their rights because of the corporations. And the main vehicle now in Ireland for this revolution, for this subversion of the culture, for the overturning of the Constitution is the homosexual. And they have reached the point, this is to get back to that the beginning of the story, at that talk show in 2014, this drag queen calls John Waters a homophobe on national television, and nobody stops him.
No kickback, no defense. The presenter was very weak and let it fly.
What's that?
You know what I mean? Yeah, the presenter was very weak. He let the accusation stick and didn't challenge it and didn't ask him to withdraw.
No, he didn't. And so John is upset. And so he asks for an apology. And at this point, they start temporizing with the lawyers. And they come up with something and they back around and so on and so forth. Eventually, he got a settlement from them. But eventually, the point here is it didn't make any difference. Because what you have now is a state in which a drag queen can call you this name, which will then cause you to be shunned, cause you to lose your job, and you have no recourse. He did have recourse in the legal system, but it didn't save his job. It didn't save his reputation because all of these forces were ganging up on him. So the point I'm trying to make here is this is not concern for human rights. This is not democracy. This is warfare. And part of what comes out in the book is that these foundations and these corporations, the oligarchs and all the money, they had basically targeted Ireland as what he calls a trophy country. In other words, if they can impose this on Ireland, which has the reputation of being a Catholic country, then who can resist it? What country can resist this? And then by extension, if it happens in Ireland, then it can get imposed on the entire European Union. And that means other Catholic countries like Poland. So because Ireland went the way it did, then the same oligarchs will now go to Poland and say, well, you know, Ireland did it. Why can't you? You have no excuse. You have to follow the plan here. This is why Ireland was so important.
I'm just teeing up a couple of things here, and I want to bring up an article, first of all, and we may discuss that as well, and I'll get onto the TPUSA and the grip analogy I was making there. But this just popped up tonight. Groups and advocates for the LGBT community requested an option to address sexual orientation and gender identity on the Census 21 to provide an honest view of Irish society and rectify a historic wrong. Now, I won't go through the whole article, Dr. Jones, because it'll take up 2 minutes, but you can see, in essence, and I'll leave the link in the description box, they want to start fragmenting what is, and make normative what is gender politics, and obviously they're bringing racial politics to racial identity. There was a recent release of jobs from the airport where they were seeking immigration officers, and I applied for the job, and I went through. It was an online process because it was a government job, and in that process there they asked you for your sexual orientation, how you identify yourself, what are your preferred nouns. So already in government institutions they're already normalizing and trying to identify, collate this evidence of people that will willingly give up this information about themselves, first and foremost, another privacy invasion, so that they can collate stats. And then they can, obviously I didn't get a second call up for an interview because I didn't answer any of the questions I said prefer not to answer. But my point being, Dr. Jones, is the proxy warriors are now moving in to enforce their rhetoric, enforce their ideology on our government institutions. We're well aware that academia has succumbed. Reading John's book, you can see that the instigation of corporate institutions giving us these transportation roads. I'm sure you read the analogy John made with his son-in-law who wanted to grow carrots out in Longford back in the old home ground. And John made it, well, how are you going to do that if Lidl and Aldi, German producers, can bring them up from the mainland Europe and sell them cheaper than you can make them here in the land just up the road? So it has no benefit. This multiculturalism is beginning to atomize us and fragmentize us. But it's a global push-out. And Ireland just doesn't recognise that this has happened in Sweden, all across Europe, and it's the same game plan. From the United States now still, with the hoax stuff that's going on with President Trump. But we want to focus on the culture war, Mike. Our emphasis is to inform the gripes, the new young conservatives, because there's a sweeping, not only a change in politics of populism, but the culture that's coming up behind the rejection of LGBT ideology, the rejection of multiculturalism in the young youth conservatives known as gripers. And they are going to be a force to be reckoned with because they, as what happened in TPUSA, I'm sure you're aware, the gripers, Nick Fuentes, were asking the questions of Charlie Kirk about the Israeli question, which they will not touch upon. Now, I'll preface that quickly. We have something similar happening here, and John is becoming involved in that with an organisation called GRIP, not to point them out specifically, but they're set up by a billionaire class who wants to install 5G here. And it's going to be another corporate way of trying to grab on and be a gatekeeper or an identity herder, as you were saying in the Groiper cast, that Charlie Kirk and the likes are there to herd young conservatives and bring them along a certain path. And I believe this is what the GRIP ideology are doing, trying to put their players in place so that the big player will not be affected.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll come up and they'll say, we have this new thing called conservatism, and you should sign on for conservatism because all your problems are due to or because of left-wing academics out there, and we need to do something about that. This is the kind of shtick that Charlie Kirk was promoting with his Turning Point USA. He would go to campuses across the country, and of course, these students are suffering at these campuses from having political correctness imposed on them. But what they woke up to over this period of time, this year, was that Charlie Kirk's no different. And everybody suspected this, but he proved everyone right when he showed up in Ohio, and suddenly there's this black homosexual guy on the stage with him. And suddenly the unspoken, maybe it is the spoken assumption here, is that you can't be a true conservative unless you accept homosexuality. Well, wait a minute. Who said that? And so you had people lining up at the microphone, including someone I know, who said, how does anal sex help us win the culture wars? At this point, the whole facade collapsed. And Rob, the black homosexual, he's upset, and he says, well, I'm going to answer that question. Well, he did not answer that question because he cannot answer that question. And over the course, the more he talked, the deeper he dug the hole that he was in, until finally the people in the audience are getting upset. You know, they realize that they are being pushed onto a reservation. And the name of this reservation is called conservatism. And the people who determine the terms of existing on this reservation are not the people in the room. There's nothing representative about this. It's the people who are paying Charlie Kirk's bills. And it turns out, who are they? Well, it's the Koch brothers foundation, among others. And they just go down the list. It's one big foundation after another supporting Charlie Kirk, which means Charlie Kirk is working against the very interest of the people he's claiming to represent. And that's the consciousness that came about during that moment. Okay, we did a little video. It's called Coke sucker economics.
Yeah.
The term Coke sucker came into parlance in Wisconsin when Scott Walker was running for governor, and it turned out that he was getting Koch brother foundation money. He represents the Koch brothers. These people represent the oligarchs, and that's the realization that happened in that room that night. So a couple of days later, Charlie shows up in Los Angeles at UCLA, and the first thing he announces is there's going to be no questions. Well, this was a disaster. When he announced that, everybody's up and everybody starts shouting. They all start chanting Q&A, Q&A. And he blew up his own organization. So he's been exposed in terms of who he works for. The people who are supposed to be following him are no longer buying. I'm talking about 18 to 24-year-olds. That's the demographic he claims to represent. They're not buying it because they have this consciousness now of the real situation. And the real situation for these people is, number one, pornography, and number two, student debt. And they're waking up to the fact that the thing you mentioned at the beginning of the program, this pornography is associated with masturbation. And so now a group of people are realizing what I've been saying for 25 years now, that sexual liberation is a form of political control. Exactly. And if you want to break the control, all you have to do is really exercise self-control. And that form of control disappears. And that's what's happening now. Over here, people are waking up to the fact that pornography is a form of control, that these people who call themselves conservatives do not represent their interests, and they're breaking away and trying to assert their own movement.
I wanted to tie, not to tie that in, but use that with the LOGOS rising, and we will mention your book there to my subscribers here. Now, you've got a new book coming out again, LOGOS Rising, and we'll talk about that. Links will be in the description below. But using LOGOS as the defense, what the Groyper movement are doing, what the 18 to 24-year-olds have doing, is using their epistemology, their testing of it in reality, and the ethnos of it, as in using the defense of LOGOS to use your reasoning to see through what is being presented to you, to rationalize it, and come up with both sides of the argument and believe with the strongest for yourself, as opposed to just following the herd, following the lead again because of this, Charlie Kirk is saying all the right things, but not questioning it and not listening to it. So when we have these events over here, I'm encouraging the same diaspora when to go to these political events, record on their social media platforms and ask these people the difficult questions, i.e. Religious freedoms, mass migration, and our politicians are now seeing this on the doorsteps because they're canvassing in local by-elections, and more citizens in Ireland are taping them and asking about mass migration and its effect. But that one, I wanted to tie that in. We're breaking away from the LOGOS, but I might edit this a little bit here. Sorry, Doctor. Yeah, considering our current demographics in regards to our Irishness, the defense of Irishness, read John's book. How will we go strategically going forward? How can we wake the consciousness of the Gen Xers, the Boomers, to the consequences and the destructive form and nature of multiculturalism. And how can we promote LOGOS? The Catholic Church, as I've said in our many previous conversations, have let us down and are continuing to let us down when not speaking out on any matter that criticises the Catholic faith. We've had desecration of churches here, Christian churches, Catholic churches, not a mention by the church. No defence in the ethos of Catholicism, Christianity, and to inspire young men to speak out. Now, they're doing it themselves, as we know, by abstaining in masturbation, by recognising the weapon that is pornography, who instigated it, who uses it, how it came through from Palestine, and how it makes the young man unfertile and docile, not want to procreate. So it's another form of weapon. Here in Ireland, going forward, have you any strategical insights for us of the coming wave that you see and changes coming forward, and what can we do to prepare?
Well, the first thing is you have to understand what happened. And I think John's book is good in that regard. You know, it focuses on Ireland. It doesn't mention the fact that it's happening all across the world, but it does focus on the fact that this was created by the oligarchs as a way of controlling the people of Ireland and keeping them docile to their type of rule. It's excluding the Irish people. I think it was John told me in our conversation, only 5% of the people that are working at Google in Ireland come from Ireland. The other 95% come from someplace else. Now, we know that there are biases in hiring here. When you're asked to give your sexual orientation, you're asked to give evidence against yourself and to ensure that you do not get the job, because the preferred person here is the homosexual. The homosexual is, I gave a speech years ago called Why the Homosexual is the Ideal Citizen. And the main reason is because his mind is so clouded by his passions that he can't access LOGOS anymore. And because you can't access LOGOS anymore, you're docile to what your employer tells you to do. You don't have children, you're not increasing population, so you're not consuming CO2 or giving off CO2. You have lots of disposable income, and you're a narcissist. All of these things are the ideal person, and this does not conform to the traditional Irish society. So this is how they're going to remake Irish society over the term of the next generation or so, and turn you into the type of slave that will make your ancestors who died in the potato famine look like free men by comparison, because this goes inside of you. The requirement here is you go inside of yourself and you change your own default settings to suit these people. And you act in a way that is immoral, which guarantees that you will be a slave to your passions. All of these things are happening right now. It has to be explained in this light. And I would say, especially to the church, because the church is forever trying to deal with this as some type of pastoral issue. Now, I'm giving these people in the church the benefit of the doubt. I'm talking about people of goodwill in the church. There are also people of bad will in the church, and the main person I bring up in this regard is the Jesuit James Martin from New York City. If there's ever a man who is doing the bidding of the oligarchs, if there's ever a man who is part of the fifth column in the Catholic Church, trying to turn the Catholic Church against its own people, it's James Martin. And his constant going around proselytizing for homosexuality is a way of destroying the church. That's what's happening here. So we have to go to the Irish church and talk to, there may be homosexuals. They may be being blackmailed. There may be homosexuals in high positions in the church. They may be being blackmailed. But there are a significant number of people who just don't see what's going on. And by that, I mean they look at this as, oh, this is a homosexual. He's got problems. We need to have pastoral care for these problems. Okay, that's true. But that doesn't change the fact that he is also a revolutionary who is being paid by multinational corporations and their foundations to destroy Ireland's culture. And in that regard, he needs to be confronted in some type of quasi-military fashion. In other words, as an invader, as someone who's trying to destroy your culture. We have to be able to make these distinctions. If we start making these distinctions, suddenly I think the fog is going to clear up, and the people who voted for these referenda are now going to understand, wait a minute, we're putting ourselves in jail here. We're destroying our own constitution. We're destroying representative government, and we're turning ourselves into lackeys for these multinational corporations. That's not what's supposed to be happening here. That's not what Ireland stands for.
Our Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, recently announced that they're going to bring in diversity quotas into government institutions, thereby, as you say, Irish people that would be applying for that job will be instantly discounted because they won't meet the diversity quotas that they're looking for, as they've done with the gender balances. As you say, it's a slow inception. Also to note, over here in Ireland, in Grafton Street, one of our main foyers there, they have what's called, we used to have the Christmas lights are all being set up for Christmas now. We have Nulligan Shuna, which was Happy Christmas in Irish, is now being converted to the Grafton Quarter, thereby another removal of a Christian ethic that's long been a tradition on Grafton Street. And I'll tie that in here quickly, Mike, with a quick video that's just surfaced up here today. And that's they want to remove the flower sellers now from town. And there was a little video, 2-minute clip made up here. I'll click it on and write it through. They're going to remove the flower sellers from Ireland. And I think this is going to be the awakening for people to understand this is what's ahead if we don't push back, speak up. You know, this woman has been here for 200 years. I'll let it play quickly, Mike, and then we might discuss it quickly.
I'm really going to try to nothing. It's hard to believe it. Well, I was actually raised in Grafton Street. And done to me, my dog, and then they got over 200 years. It's my grandmother. First last night. A lot of people are stopping and saying, you can see what is in the papers and what is on the news about we want the flowers that are out of that. I thought it was joking. Want to move the store up to see what's within. It's a suggestion on nothing to do with the shops. How about like people to stop and it's a pedestrian on the street? If you go to one, why do you going to be a people fighting the team because it's not out of their money. How do you have no money these millionaires that thought we lived there? I had money for born. We ran shops out, but we got that right on there, and we never did.
She just said it there, Dr. Jones. It's what I believe in. This, I think, will be the undercurrent for the oligarchs, the Irish sense of what is right and belief in what is right and doing the right thing. It's still very much in our culture. As generous as we are, we've always been known to speak our truth. They're with Logos, still there in the Irish, in the elder generation. Whole family have been in that part of that flower selling part for 200 years. And our culture has been on this island for over 1,000 years. And that innate sense of belonging and Irishness, when it finally reaches tipping point, and I believe we are close to that, because we are endlessly drowned out. Speakers like myself, like Gemma O'Doherty, like John Waters, other great voices, who are being labelled as racist, homophobes, bigots. The more they use these words, but they don't begin to realise that the people see this, and they'll dig in their heels and they'll say, no, you know, Ireland is not for sale. I wanted to get your thoughts on that little brief video there, Mike.
That's you're right. You formulated the issue. Is Ireland for sale? is everything for sale. This part of the referendum, part of what John pointed out in his book, is that these are articles in the Constitution were not rights granted by the government. They were inalienable rights. They belong to any person simply because he's a person. And what they're saying is, well, the rich and the powerful can now take inalienable rights away from people. One of them is the right to life. Well, they did that. There's a certain group of people who now no longer have the right to life. That's the result of the last referendum. What I'm trying to say here is that every time you hear this rhetoric of rights or the rhetoric of tolerance or the rhetoric of talking about homosexuality or the persecution of these people, you're talking about a war on the Irish people. Everyone who does not fit into these categories is going to be a second-class citizen in his own country. That is the whole point of all of these campaigns. And you will have no form of redress anymore. And the crucial moment is approaching here, as far as I understand, because I think the next item on the agenda is going to be hate speech. Or, to put it the other way, what these oligarchs and their proxy warriors are now going to try to do is remove the right to free speech from the Constitution. At a certain point, the people are going to have to wake up to the fact that this is not in our interest. And secondly, they're going to have to think about the fact of, well, why are you attacking free speech? Is there some reason why we shouldn't be allowed to discuss these things? And if they come back and say, no, we're just against hate speech, well, then you need to say, well, who defines what hate speech is? And the answer to that is very clear. It's a Jewish organization in the United States of America known as the Anti-Defamation League. Don't take my word for it. Go to their website and they will tell you that they are the world's biggest authority on hate speech. That's too modest. They created hate speech. They are the people who created it. I covered this in something you can find now on Amazon Kindle. The ebook is called Jewish Privilege. This is how they create Jewish privilege, because they create this term called hate speech, and basically anything that they don't like, they get to ban because they don't like it. Now, who gave the ADL the right to tell Americans and now Irishmen what they're allowed to say? Who gave them that right? Nobody. You cannot delegate that right. It is a fundamental right, and you cannot delegate it. Okay? And secondly, if we look into this organization, it's the last organization in the world that should have any type of say over what we're allowed to say. What is the ADL? It's a Jewish money laundering operation that basically ensures that Jewish criminals don't go to jail. Because anytime you approach a Jewish criminal and tell him he's guilty of crimes, the ADL will call you an anti-Semite. This was true. I give examples. Mo Dalitz, the famous mobster, gave a lot of money to the ADL, and the ADL then gave him an award. And at that point, he was not touchable. The law could not touch this man. There was a recent case in Texas. A man's on death row, and suddenly he comes up and says the judge is an anti-Semite, and suddenly he's not on death row anymore. I could give you instance after instance. All I'm trying to say here is, in the situation in Ireland, when they go after hate speech, they're going after your right to free speech. And what they're doing is saying is basically, we don't have any answer to your argument. We don't care anymore about answering your arguments. We're going to throw you in jail for making the argument just by the fact that you made the argument. Now, at this point, what I see here is them pushing this too far. I think that with things like John's book, you have the vehicle for consciousness, or logos, if you want to talk about that, rising in Ireland. That suddenly the scales are going to fall from the people's eyes, and they're going to realize, no, this isn't what they've been telling us. It's the same type of process that's happening with the Groypers, except that's sexual liberation and political control. It's a slightly different thing. It's related. What you see is this consciousness spreading among that group. They are starting to realize that there is an order to the universe. And the fact of the matter is that you'll never find it out by going to college. As a matter of fact, if you go to college, you go deep in debt to find out there's no meaning to the universe, and which will make you even more of a slave to your passions. So they're waking up to the fact that, no, there is a rational order to the universe. I can access that rational order. I can pull myself out of this tailspin of addiction to pornography. I can lead a successful life. That's what you're starting to see dawning here. I think the same thing is true now of Ireland in a slightly different sense, that they're starting to wake up to the fact that all of these people were very skilled manipulators, okay? And they took the natural compassion of the Irish people that flows naturally from Catholicism, which teaches you to love your neighbor, and they perverted it by turning it into giving special treatment to people who should not be doing what they're doing. And any real compassion for a homosexual should begin by telling him, don't do that, any more than you're an alcoholic or a drug addict. You're not doing them favors by giving them alcohol or drugs. They're going to wake up to this fact. They're going to realize this is warfare in our age. It's not red coats versus blue coats. This is psychological warfare, and its goal is to destroy the Irish people. Not only simply to destroy the Irish people so that the oligarchs can do whatever they want there, but to use Ireland as an example for the rest of the world, and saying that if they went along, then you're going to have to go along, because they were really Catholic and they don't have any objection, so you're going to have to go along. You now meaning Poland, you meaning Hungary, and then you also meaning Africa. All of the countries in East Africa are now being subjected to a pressure campaign to get them to decriminalize their laws against sodomy. One of the countries just caved in. A little insignificant country, which was basically threatened, if you don't do this, we'll cut off aid. And so the politicians who were on the take with the aid basically caved in and did what they said. This is a worldwide campaign to basically subjugate all of the indigenous peoples of the world to a nomenclatura of oligarchic proxy warriors who cannot be questioned because of their homosexuality. That's what's going on.
The reason I'm focusing my attention on the Groiper, as I said at the very start of our conversation, that's where people might have last left off with you on the Groiper, on the Groipcast. But in essence, our responsibility now, and what we've spoken about, is that because the Groipers are aware that we're now creating what they're going to inherit, and what they see what we're creating now, or what is starting to form with the fragmentation of family, with the ramp openness of degeneracy. It's blackpilling them to see what they see as the fall of empires or the fall of what they gain. So they are speaking out. So it's incumbent upon the truth warriors, the logos drivers, to wake up as many people, to slow the process down, because just as you described the last time, what in essence it's going to do is it's going to flood many different cultures into a competition for resources, thereby driving civil wars, thereby bringing the state to come in to increase its power, as in like the Hegelian dialect, problem, solution, reaction. They keep creating, they're allowing these NGO, third class, oligarch proxy warriors to bring in their ideologies, they're now currently going into the classrooms to bring in the new social sex education program here in Ireland. Some of it, I brought attention to a leaflet that's been brought up here, speaking about porn literacy. I want to round off and finish off on this, because it's getting into the minutiae of the actual usage of the weapon that is pornography. They want to teach children 6 to 8 porn literacy, terminology such as felching, common terms that are used in the porn language, and to expose them. This may seem shocking, as it is shocking to begin with, but what it's designed to do is to corrupt the mind, to actually cause damage to it, so that it will become more susceptible to programming. And the more graphic, and I say this because one of my fans reached out to me on Instagram, and clearly they were at school saying that their maths classes are now being interrupted for LGBT education, the new sex education, or porn literacy classes, that they're superseding LOGOS now by taking time away from mathematics to bring in reinforcement of LGBTQ. And she's aware of it. She was a female, and she was aware of it. Said, this is taking away from my valuable time for maths. I've got exams coming up, but we can't say anything because the professional, the third party professional that's brought in to teach the new sex education, that is being pushed down from Brussels, that is legislated for by the UN. So it's already a done deal. We have to facilitate it. They're making it seem like that we're just testing the waters. What can we get away with? How many drag queen story times can we push out on 3-year-olds? You know, the little shots that they're pocking out, they're shocking. But then once the public get over the shock, it's normative and it keeps happening. And then what can you do? Because parents aren't reacting. Only the Muslims are reacting in the UK by taking to the streets. The pushback here in Ireland is they're ringing and they're phoning, but sooner or later they're going to have to get down to the school because they're still going to march on and push this forward. My point being, the indoctrination, the push, the corruption of the young mind, this is the last, I think, the tipping point for Ireland. I think many parents are so angered and incensed by the schools' capitulation and no pushback to Europe first and foremost, but then to the UN. And more people must see the corrupt entity that the UN is, because not only they're now with the, sorry for speaking so fast, the gender identities, they want this global citizen initiative. They want to start teaching the youth about becoming global citizens, not Irish nationals, not English nationals, not Polish nationals, but global citizens. That they come up with this ethos of European identity and then global identity. Do you understand what I mean by that, Mike?
I do. Yeah. John's very eloquent about Irish identity. He's got a chapter in there about cutting turf and the people who did it. The whole book is addressed to his father, and an identification of his father as a man who had this identity at a time when the country was poor, and he had a solidarity with other people. And John just absorbed this naturally, in spite of the fact that he wanted to become a rock and roll star, or at least a rock and roll journalist. And he began to realize the shallowness of that identity, which was basically a kind of confected identity that was dropped onto the Irish people to lure them away from their own traditions. That was mild compared to what came later. Okay, we had the same type of, if you're talking about sex education, we had these battles in the 80s here. And the net result of sex education was the creation of the homeschool movement in the United States of America, where large numbers of people simply just said, this is going too far, and these parents withdrew their children from the schools. We were part of it. I mean, when my children were younger, the first one was not successful. He went back to school, went to a Catholic school instead. The younger three we did do homeschooling with, and it was very successful because they were similar in age and a lot of different reasons. But there were a lot of people in Indiana who did it, and I think this is part of the reason that Indiana became a target. It was in many ways a trophy state in the same way that Ireland was a trophy country, because the legislature here had basically capitulated and said, the public school system does not have a monopoly on public money. And so they started giving out vouchers where the parent could choose where he was going to send his child to school. This had a huge effect on creating real diversity in education in Indiana. And it was one of the main reasons that the United States is called the United States, okay? We are not all supposed to be ruled directly from Washington. That's not part of the way this country was founded. And so what you saw was differences in the states emerging largely because the legislators represented the people, which is what they were supposed to do, as opposed to the oligarchs, which is what many other politicians were doing at the same time. So in the course of divine providence, the push for sex education led to homeschooling.
Yeah, I know many friends of mine are actually currently doing that. They're teaching their kids homeschooling and bringing in diets, so they can see the immediate benefits and stuff like that. And we follow the example of Owen. And I'm glad you brought that up, the homeschooling up there, because it's Owen Benjamin's lifestyle at the moment and his streams, giving young men who might have chosen a path, to go travel and to extend their time away from creating the family. He's encouraging them then now to get involved, to do what the gripers want to do, steer away from pornography, realize self-control, self-abstention from masturbation, to keep yourself in the game, to keep the strength, the inner strength there and the drive. Understand Logos, get your connection back to God, and that the morality of Christianity and Catholicism that wants to strive to bring the family unit, to create, to reproduce, to carry on the traditions that have been learned of their moralities, of their cultures. We're suffering now. We recently have a young child over here who was FGM'd, and it's one of the first cases over. I think we've had 16,000 young children sent abroad to Somalia. They've had their clitorectomies. They've come back here needing medical attention. But this is one of the first cases I've seen where a 2-year-old, she had her clitorectomy done in Ireland. They didn't ship her home. They've started to do it here now. She had major blood loss, had to go to hospital, and now the parents are being prosecuted. We'll await to see the outcome of that, because that then will set precedents. People of that culture will be persuaded not to do that to their children. But yet again, we can see the incursion now of barbaric practices among all religions. Now they're going to say, GT, what about Catholicism? What about we don't do any of that now. You're still circumcising young boys. You're still circumcising young girls. The majority of them killing them and preventing fertility, presenting the enjoyment of sexual pleasure in a loving relationship. So we can see these clash of identities, but there's no downfall. I just want people to be aware that this is by design, not just by what we say, and it's not all Jews, and it's the Zionisms, and it's the different classes of Jewish, the Talmudic reasoning, as we see. It's the Talmudic reasoning that's driving people to create what is the apocalypse. But we want revelation, and this is what I think is happening with the President Trump's attempted coup attempts and the revelations now of the ownership, the corporate ownership of the media broadcast, and how that, as we already understood it to be a useful propaganda tool, that they control media. They do it here in Ireland. And their reporting on the United States now is that the impeachment inquiry is going really well. Well, if we're paying attention to it, it's a complete nonsense. There is no quid pro quo. President Trump said it in his second conversation to the actual ambassador that was in the call. I want nothing. I want him to do what he ran on. I want no quid pro quo. That's the end of the impeachment inquiry. But our media are doing what the Wall Street Journal do, what the New York Times do, propagating the Democrats' message. And the Democrats, i.e. the Clintons, the cabal, have been very heavily influential on Irish politics since the peace agreement, all the way through now to the takeover of our academia, our political classes. And we need to, when people become aware of that Jeffrey Epstein is like Christmas decorations, that they don't hang themselves. He did not hang himself. There's an underlying coup, and it's becoming more and more apparent with the constant prosecution of President Trump. I wait and hope for the IG report, for Bull Durham's criminal prosecutions, so that people will see criminal convictions. Do you think we'll see that, Mike?
I think that the impeachment proceedings are an attempt to overturn the will of the American people, because they voted this man into office, and the deep state has been trying to get rid of him ever since he entered the White House. So, yeah, I see it that way as well.
Okay, Dr. Jones, we more or less touched on pretty much everything I wanted to touch on. A lot of requests coming in for questions. If we do this again, I want to try and set it up for a live stream so that you could take questions from the live chat themselves, and you can discern. I know you're doing a great tour around many YouTube stations, and I encourage people to follow Dr. Michael Jones on his YouTube station, where all of his interviews with various different YouTubers from many great YouTubers around the world, and you're having a great big push on the zeitgeist. Did you ever think or realize that with your constant work through culture wars, your prolific writing, and your understandings, that you would have gained this kind of prominence that's now, I would say, and hopefully would blindside Jordan Peterson, who I think is a complete gatekeeper and a possible meth head?
Well, that's the book about Logos, is about how this moves throughout history. And it's not something one man can do. It's something that you can do in collaboration with
the divine lifting, sir. Let's not take it away from you. You're doing a lot of heavy lifting. Keep going, sir. Tell us about your new book before we sign off.
The Logos Rising, a history of ultimate reality. You can go to culturewars.com and you can sign up for a copy of the book. We're editing it right now. It will be going to the printer soon, and should have copies by the beginning of next year.
That's fantastic to see, and just to encourage you, we'll come back for a live stream on another invitation and have a quick conversation with our Irish audience over here, please.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Michael. An absolute gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this quick conversation with the good Dr. Jones. If you're new here to the channel, please don't forget, press the like button, press the subscription button and the bell, and be reminded of future broadcasts here. Please, if you're not new to Dr. Jones' channel, go over there and subscribe to him, and also make your way over to culturewars.com, and you'll see a whole collection of Dr. Jones' previous work. Dr. Jones, thank you for joining me tonight. See you again in the next episode.
Thank you, Rowan.
Us, everybody. Take care.